What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Average Money Podcast. In this episode, we're going to kind of go behind the curtains a little bit. And JJ and I, in this day and age, we're talking so much about stocks and options and things to pick. But there is, that foundation that our personal finance journey was built on. And that is Dave Ramsey's 7 Baby Steps. Now, full disclosure, I can't say even, I'm not going to speak for JJ. He'll give his opinion in a second. But they're not really the 7 steps that we kind of live by. But we have to be really sure to give credit where credit is due and show that for a majority of Americans and for a majority of individuals, even throughout the world, the teachings of Dave Ramsey as far as getting out of debt and learning about money and learning about personal finance at least needs to be noted. And that's really going to be the goal. We're going to talk about the 7 baby steps, the things that we didn't know then that we know now, and the ways that maybe we could kind of get outside the spreadsheet a little bit, think more personal finance, and take his set in stone philosophies and kind of make them our own. And I think that's kind of where we stand right now on Dave Ramsey's baby steps. So if you are new to this podcast, my name is Brad Finn. I am joined by the one and only JJ Buckner. JJ, how are we doing tonight, bud?
I'm good, man. I'm drinking a bottle of my wife's wine tonight. I think you got the wine glass too, except you got the good old light art I'm waiting to get my hands on when you come in. So cheers to the episode. If anybody's drinking with us, cheers out there. Or if you're at the gym, cheers your protein shake or water bottle or whatever the hell you're drinking. But it's a Saturday night for us. It's a typical, what is tonight?
Tonight is Saturday
night?
Oh, is your life that, guys, big time 90,000 subscriber JJ Buckner and doesn't even know what day of the week it is anymore. No, we had so much fun recording on Saturday night last week that we're like, let's put the wives to bed again early and let's do this again.
So true. I mean, we don't have to worry about anything. We can go as long as we want. We can film as many episodes as we want. And that's why we say this all the time, guys. We absolutely love filming these podcasts because, we're doing this on a Saturday night and we're not getting paid to do this. This is what we just love to do. And
thanks to our newest Patreon followers, we actually are getting paid for this. And maybe we'll bring them up. I think we have 4 or 5. This episode might actually be sponsored by our Patreon members. And we started up a Discord this week because we realized with the Facebook group, it's so hard. It's a separate app and the stream is so unorganized. And JJ and I spend most of our time on our personal Discord chats. So we did start a Discord, and I posted, if you're in that Facebook, you'll see I left a message. I know that not a lot of people know what it is, and change can be kind of crazy, and what is this Discord they're talking about? I promise you, I was new to Discord in September, and even the chat that's going on right now inside the Average Money Discord is awesome. I'll leave a link in the show notes or something like that, but we actually now officially, we are making like $20 a month.
Yeah, well, and I want to say this too, because Brad and I both have gotten reached out from listeners of the podcast saying hey, you guys don't really promote affiliates. You don't have sponsorships. How are ways we can kind of support, the podcast? And, luckily Brad and I have our, we have our jobs and, YouTube and side hustles and things going on. So we are able to do something like this on the side. But Brad and I were talking, we're Patreon would be the best thing because they get, access to early episodes. They get to chat with us. Pretty much any day during the week in the morning time and also in the evenings on Discord. Because like Brad said, we are on there a lot because we each have our own personal ones too. So if you guys are looking to support the podcast, join Patreon membership. You guys feel free to ask any questions to the Discord. Facebook page is still open, but it was very hard to manage, and Brad and I would miss so many things. To where a Discord, it's just so much more organized.
You can organize by chat and things, people that don't know what it is. And yeah, that was, we weren't ditching, we're not ditching Facebook. We just felt bad. I was like, JJ, did you see that comment? And he's like, no, because they organized their stream weird. And we really think that this podcast and this community could really grow. And from our personal experience through YouTube and things like that, we knew that the only way to keep a growing community organized was to make a Discord. And it's not just paid. We have a bunch of free chats in there. We just, like JJ said, we wanted to give people opportunity. People were DMing me after the episode a couple weeks ago, hey, can I give you a couple bucks so you can fly there and see JJ? And I didn't want to be Venmo me. I think I wrote it out in the Facebook group and I saw it. I was like, I got to take this down. It just seemed dirty. But now for $2.50 a month on Patreon, you can get some extra access. A way for us to give you guys some added value and stuff, and then also give you the opportunity. But it's not just paid. Like Discord is also free, and as somebody asked in the Facebook group, is the free like this? I'm like, it's better than this, because even the free chats are organized. Yeah. What's your thoughts on tonight's episode, JJ? Was I pretty much spot on with the intro there? I feel like, especially long since my days of YouTube Baby Steps Brad, people think that, I'm against Dave Ramsey now, or, I have credit cards and I have these things, so I can't be a Dave Ramsey. I still feel like if I bumped into that dude, handshake and a hug for him, man.
So much respect for, Dave is the OG. Let's just all say it. He's the OG in the finance space. I would probably guess 95% of the finance YouTubers out there who've been around for a bit got started with Dave Ramsey. I was one of them, and he's definitely the foundation of the finance space. He has the baby steps. He's had them set in place. And again, kind of like you said, Brad, we'll touch on our thoughts. But I would say this, for the average American who is not looking to further advance their financial capability, they're not looking to grow their net worth, they're not tracking their net worth, they're not, super nerding out on everything. I would have to say Dave Ramsey's baby steps is what I would lead any other average American towards, because of how well put together it is. Everything in the steps, and again, we're going to break it down here one by one and give our thoughts on each one. But in a general sense of things, I think for the average typical American who doesn't want to further advance their finances in like a kind of that next step basis, that the baby steps are the great foundation for everyone.
Two things, and this is only because it came up in comments. We often say average American and things like that, and we're mostly referring to like the ways to invest are kind of like Americans. We know we have international listeners, and I can promise you, because when we say average American, because a lot of times we're talking about brokerage accounts and taxable accounts and retirement accounts that are pretty United States focused. That's where we're from. But I will say, for the record, this is one of those that if you are an international listener, I think the philosophies and stuff are going to be helpful. And just to follow up, I think the only argument that I've seen now is it's really like maximizing efficiency. Like if you follow Dave Ramsey's plan to a T, you're going to win. You can't. Yeah, you're going to win. You can't get screwed over. Nobody gets to the other side of Dave Ramsey's program and is like, I regret that. I never should have done that. I'm worse off with my money and my personal finance than I was before. There might be some people that are like, I could have made a little bit more, or I could have invested a couple different ways. And I don't think, and I'm not saying there's nobody, but the people that I've talked to in the last 4 years of being involved in this, and like I said, starting my channel is Baby Steps Brad, it's been pretty much a tip-top, review.
I just want to reiterate that Brad and I both have the largest respect for Dave Ramsey. I honestly think he is one of the major reasons why I am doing what I'm doing today. He kind of lit that spark underneath me when I was looking to pay off my student loans, and I had no idea what I was doing in the finance space back in 2014. And I did a random Google search on the internet while I was sitting in my cubicle at work. And I searched, how do I pay off my student loans? And Dave Ramsey's face popped up, and then the rest is history. And I became obsessed with bettering my financials and growing my net worth as year over year.
So for anybody that is listening to this podcast and has no idea what we're talking about, just a brief overview of who Dave Ramsey is and what these baby steps are that we're talking about. Like, no, we're not going to be talking about our kids tonight. Dave Ramsey has one of the largest podcasts in the world. He has an everyday radio station that's syndicated all over the world. He also streams that live on YouTube every single day. He is a rags to riches kind of story. Some people would argue some of the things that he says that they're a little storytelling, but he, went through that bankruptcy, started in real estate, and then pretty much figured out a way to get himself out of the hole that he was in. He has family. He's older now. I would say in his 60s. Sorry, Dave, if you're in your 50s. But he created, or he's well known for two things that you might hear. One is which is Financial Peace University. And he talks about that in that program that he does. And I took FPU. I don't know if JJ did, but I took it very early on. And inside FPU, he talks about these 7 baby steps, these 7 steps that can take you from where he was in bankruptcy, not knowing anything about money, to now what I assume Ramsey Solutions is probably worth multiple millions of dollars, and himself included. I've seen his house/compound. So he's, like I said, he's used these philosophies, and he's one of the few people that I've ever seen that really have never skewed away from his beliefs. Like, it's hard to look back and say he's a hypocrite on anything, and maybe that's one fault of his. And that's something we'll talk about, I think, is maybe that lack of evolution has maybe held him back from the younger generation. But, you know, he's a good dude. And if you are one of those people that's starting out, like listening to this podcast, like, I'm still in debt, I'm trying to figure it out, and you haven't heard about Dave Ramsey, you can listen to what we have to say, but I definitely would recommend at least starting it. I don't think he's somebody that you're going to follow for 10 years, but he is the foundation.
Definitely. 100% agree. So, Brad, I guess for today's episode, you know, let's run through these 7 steps. Let's give our opinions on each of them, because I think both of us may have done videos in the past on YouTube of our thoughts on the baby steps program, what we think is correct, what things we would have changed when we were going through them, because I started out at doing the baby steps and I changed it up about halfway through, and I can kind of touch on that as we go through today's episode. But it'll be interesting today. But I do want to say, you know, as someone out there who you guys are maybe stumbled upon the podcast today and you're in major debt, you're going through a bankruptcy, you're just lost, you don't know what to do, I think today's episode is really going to help you out, because you may feel like you're stuck and you don't know where to go, but trust me, there is a way out of the financial distress and the financial situation that you are in. It's just going to take a little bit of work up front. You know, you're not going to get anything handed to you in life. You got to work for it. So if you want to make the change, it's got to be up to you. But today's episode is really going to help you out.
And full disclosure, JJ, you can call me a liar if I'm speaking for you, but we do not follow the Ramsey 7 baby steps currently in our life. And that's not because they're wrong. It's just because of, like I said, that way that you adapt into your own personal situation. Is that fair to say, JJ?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So baby step 1 is to establish a $1,000 emergency fund in cash that's under the mattress that you can't touch. This is going to be the start of your journey. And there's a couple reasons why he wants you to do this. For a lot of people that are in financial trouble, saving up $1,000 is hard to do. And I think sometimes we look at just the amount of money as opposed to the lesson. And for me, listening and reading his books, there's a part of the lesson. He's saying, he made $1,000 an amount of money that if you really were committed and you were going to do this, you could definitely save the money up. So a lot of people want to argue like $1,000's not enough. I think he chose an amount in the back of his mind that said, we're not just telling people to get $1,000, but we're teaching people right from the start of what it might feel like to have to save money. Now, for me personally, people ask me all the time, is this enough money this day and age? Is $1,000 enough money? And when I first started, it was, Dave says 1,000, do 1,000. But I think now, knowing personal finance is personal, everyone has different living expenses. Everybody has different risks for job security. Everyone has different kids. And I think too, when he started this, if we counted inflation, I think I did the video like maybe 2 years ago where I did like, if you took his $1,000 baby step 1 and accounted for inflation, it would be like $1,800. And I think my wife and we did $1,500 a person. So I think my baby step 1 was $3,000, which also coincidentally was pretty much like 1 month living expenses. But when you're looking at baby step number 1, in my opinion, you need to have enough money that makes you sleep at night, but makes you feel like, oh man, I only have that amount of money in the bank.
That's a solid point, man. That is a really great point. And I will kind of roll off that saying that I do agree that in today's age, $1,000 is just not enough. But the scary part is there is a very large percentage of Americans who live every single day and they cannot cover a $1,000 emergency expense. And that is scary to say that. I will say, make that be one of your goals for 2021 if you are one of those Americans, or, not just Americans, like Brad mentioned earlier, even some of our international listeners. If you can't afford a $1,000 expense, make that be your first goal for 2021 and saving up that emergency fund. But with that being said, I do think $1,000 is not enough. Yeah. You need, so my wife and I, we had around $5,000 in the bank whenever we were kind of like starting to pay off our debt right out of college for a couple reasons. Let's say you have a car and your transmission goes out. What are you going to do with that $1,000 in the bank? That's not going to cover a full transmission replace. Yeah, you can go stick it on the credit card or do whatever you got to do to get the bill paid, but you're not really making progress doing that. So I like having that cash sitting there for kind of the worst case scenario. If you get your AC goes out, if you live in, if you own your own home, that's probably we're talking a $4,000 to $7,000 expense, depending on what all you do and where you live in the country or in the world. So having the $1,000 is just, that doesn't cut it for me. And again, I am gonna nitpick these baby steps today just for the entertainment of the episode, but also I'm giving my true thoughts here. I mean, this is really what I think now, as being someone who I do feel that I'm pretty well knowledge in the financial realm, being in the space so long and literally reading books and articles and listening to videos day after day after day because I'm so passionate about it, that I do think you need to have a little bit more than that $1,000 for the baby step one.
And we'll use my next point to go into baby step 2, because I found out that there's 2 types of people that enter baby step 1. Okay. And most of the people have debt. Like it's very hard to stumble upon Dave Ramsey if you're not in debt. So when I got into it, and maybe you're one of these 2 people, you are either, I have a ton of debt and I have no money, so I have to raise up to that $1,000, and that $1,000 is going to be hard for me to hit. Or the other extreme, which is what I was, you have a ton of debt, you have some fair amount of money in the bank, and decreasing the cash in your bank down to baby step 1 is also very, very frightful. So for me, when we started it, I probably had, I know how much debt I had. I had $189,000 worth of debt. And I probably had $1,000 or so, I think it was $1,300 a month in minimums and debt payments. And I probably had $12,000 in the bank. Whatever you decide your baby step 1 amount's going to be, like we said that it was going to be $3,000. We emptied our bank account to $3,000 to get started on baby step 2. And I will say that, I don't care if your baby step 1 amount is $1,000 or $10,000. I'm not going to debate that with you. But I will say, when you get to the number that you think is your 1 month living expense, that's going to be your 1 emergency month, empty your bank accounts to help pay off your debt. And I think it'll seem scary, but that fear definitely motivated me to succeed.
Yeah, I'll second that, Brad. So we did the same thing. We had $60,000 in student loans. That's all the debt we had. We didn't have any car debt, credit card debt, or anything like that. It was strictly student loans of my wife and I coming out of college. And so my wife graduated a year before I did. So she was working. She was already kind of focusing on paying down those student loans. But this was before I even heard about Dave Ramsey, because I was still in college, still living it up. You know what I mean? But not worrying about my student loans.
Still living it up, buddy.
That's right. But once we figured out about Dave Ramsey and everything, and we really got focused on paying down our student loans as fast as possible, is we ended up, I think we had around $10K in cash. And I really had to talk Lindsay into pulling more of that money out, kind of like you guys did, down to your $3,000. We got down to the 5, and Lindsay felt very uncomfortable, but I listened to the podcast and the episodes, and I said, well, babe, that's going to motivate us to get this debt paid off faster so we can put the cash back into the bank so you can feel safer and sleep better at night. She's like, okay, yeah, let's do this. Let's get this debt going. And luckily, Lindsay was already working on her loans while I was still in college, but we ended up paying off our $60,000 of student loans in around 9 months or so after I graduated.
Beautiful. And we'll talk about the debt payoff. And actually, I'll go into that right now, but I want to say, if we forget to mention it in baby step 2, it does not matter how fast you pay it off. And if you get involved in the Ramsey community, you're going to see people, I paid off this amount this fast. And you're going to start to judge yourself like, Susie paid it off in 3 months. What am I doing? Like, I think there's an overarching kind of philosophy that we have to have through baby steps 1 through 7 is this is personal finance. And your story is going to be so different than somebody else's. And the major mistake that I made, overarching this whole thing, was comparing myself to what other people were doing. So like, you said that you paid that off, great. And I paid mine off in a certain amount of time, great. And you're going to pay that off in a certain amount of time. So great. So let's get to the baby step 2, unless you have anything to follow up on baby step 1.
Well, no. Baby step 2 is what I was getting ready to touch on.
You want to introduce baby step 2?
Yeah. So baby step 2 is pay off all of your debt except the house using the Debt Snowball Method. So there's a few things here. First and foremost, I will agree that everyone, once they have that starter emergency fund in place, that paying off your consumer debt should be the number one goal on your list. With that being said, Dave says that you should not be investing in baby step 2. And Brad, you and I had many debates back in the baby steps Brad's era of how you disagreed with me on investing during baby steps 2. And I said, well, I would at least be putting, if you get a match in your company, at least do the match because you'd be missing out on free money. And then also I would say I was putting money into my Roth because I wanted to take advantage of the taxes and being so young. So that kind of goes hand in hand there. And I know a lot of people would disagree with me on that. And I know a lot of people that would agree with me on that. So you got to find the happy place. And again, this is going to be kind of a broken record, but personal finance is personal. It's what works for you. And here's something else too that Dave would argue with me on, or kind of act with me on, is that you don't invest during baby step 2, because for those of you that are money nerds out there, it does hurt not investing in your 401k. It does hurt missing that free match, free money company match. So that entices you to pay off that debt even faster, so you can get back on track with investing and getting that company match that you do at your job.
Yeah, I'll agree with you that I can't say I was more gung-ho Dave. I think we found Dave at different times in our lives, and you were kind of coming off the peak curve when I was the peak. And we've mentioned before, I used to debate you and you'd smile like, I've been there, bud. You'll come around, and it is true. As far as, and I'm going to talk about what baby step 2 actually means in a second, and the arguments against it, but I will say that I told you that there is no way, shape, or form that you should be doing it. And I will also agree, full disclosure, I now advise people, if you do have a company match, that is free money, and it's a long road, and that should be a good idea. And the Roth thing, I'm still up in the air for. I know the Roth is time sensitive, and I think I would look at that in consulting in an individual basis, like what types of consumer debt do we have? But
that's right. Hang on, because I gotta say it. It really does depend, because now we're on this subject. I want to make sure I touch on it real quick. If you have a very high interest credit card debt, I don't give a shit about that company match.
Right.
You're paying 16, 18, sometimes 20+% on that credit card. That company match don't mean anything. You need to get that credit card bill paid off ASAP.
Yeah, we'll talk about that when we talk about Snowball versus Avalanche and interest.
Got it.
Because you make a very good point. Like, there's some things that are definitely going to take priority. And first, let me just break down for those of you who don't know, and it might be hard to listen to. Like, this is one of those things, especially for me being a visual learner, that you might want to see. But I think you can follow along. Essentially, Dave wants us to list all of our debts from the least principal balance to the most principal balance. He does not care what the current minimum is. He does not care what the interest is. And his argument is, if we cared about interest, and we cared about all this math, we wouldn't be in trouble in the first place, because we'd already know that debt was bad for us. So that's like that first introduction. Then he says, all right, we're going to pay the minimums on everything except for that first item, the lowest principal balance you have. And you are going to throw the house at that. You're going to throw the kitchen sink. Every single dollar. You find a quarter on the street, it's going on that first debt. You find this, it's going on that first debt. He uses words like gazelle intention, scorched earth. And essentially, let's say that first one had $100 minimum. You had a credit card and had $100 minimum on it. So you're paying $100 plus everything else you have. When you pay that one off, instead of saying, ooh, I have $100 of free money, I don't have that minimum payment anymore. No. You take that 100, you roll it into the next one, and then that now becomes your scorched earth. So essentially the entire time you're in baby step 2, for me, it was a little over a year. When I started, I had, let's call it for round numbers, let's call it $1,000 in minimum payments. I think it was more like $3,400 actually, but I'd have to go back. It was so long ago.
Yeah.
But let's say you have $1,000 in minimums today. You're going to have $1,000 in minimums until you're done, because that's the snowball that he's talking about. Right now you're paying the minimums of everything, but then the minimums are just going to fall down to the next one and fall down to the next one and fall down. So by the time you get to your last debt, which was your biggest principal, you're now paying the sum of all of those minimums every single month, plus your scorched earth. And I'll tell you this, at this point, you've already been doing this for a while and you're starting to get fired up and you start finding money in places you never, ever thought you could find money before. And then you get that day where you click the last payment and you used to be a man's man, or you used to be a strong, powerful woman, and you are crying like a baby at the computer paying off your last debt.
It literally is. It's a different feeling, man. It hits in such a way that, like, it's a totally different experience that I've never really felt before. I don't know. It's like a sense of accomplishment. It's a goal you've been working towards, but also you're gaining some life back in yourself.
Yeah.
You don't owe the bank. You don't owe anyone money except if you have a mortgage.
Can I interject and ask you something about this? Because I'm trying to match that feeling. It's not the feeling of kids. It's not the feel like...
Right.
I've cried tears of joy before, but as far as money, I got to ask you this. I'm not a millionaire, and I don't think you are either.
No, not yet.
What do you think will be... Do you think it will be a similar feeling when you get to a net worth of $1 million versus debt-free? Like, I'm trying to, like, place, like... Obviously, you're no different when you're debt-free, but that feeling that gets lifted off your shoulder, I feel like the next thing after debt-free is really like, I'm a millionaire.
Yeah, no.
When I look at the bank and say that I'm a millionaire, I feel like I'm going to have that similar emotional overtaking that I had when I paid my last debt off.
This is such an easy answer for me. The millionaire status will hit me much harder than the debt-free will.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
Such a longer grind.
I thought the first 100,000 was was the hard part.
Nope. No way, man. The first million's the hardest. And I think that's going to be one of my biggest, like, accomplishments. And it will make paying off debt feel like crumbs almost. Because I got to say this, though, man.
I don't know. I don't know how I'm going to feel. I never knew how I'd feel when I was going to pay off debt. I was always like, I'm going to click that payment and then I'm going to have lunch. And like I said, I cried like a baby at the keyboard.
I got to say this, though. When I paid off my debt, you got to think, though, man, I was 9 months out of college. So it really wasn't like a long time frame. And I'm not saying that to flex by any means.
I was 37. So it's like, it's never too late, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So, like, I guess I didn't have that long build-up feeling and process of, like, I got to get this done. It was such a fast point of my life. I mean, it wasn't even a year to where, like, that $1 million status has been something I've been working towards since 2016.
That's a great point. Like, baby step 2 for some people is going to be an effing grind or so fast.
Yeah.
I know people that started with me in baby steps Brad days that are still paying off debt. And like I said, back to that, it doesn't matter. I still clap for them when they win, but yeah, I guess there's that time domain. And I just want to wrap baby step 2 up with the alternative, the debt snowball. And you're more of a math and numbers guy, and this is the argument that you'd make with me. Can you just let people know where the debt avalanche might be a benefit, or like what interest rates are you really cutting off? Like, this is a now thing, this is a now emergency, and this is it doesn't matter that much.
Yeah, so I'm glad you did kind of lay out the debt snowball because I was getting a little ahead of myself there. But so the debt avalanche is basically pretty much the same thing as the debt snowball, except the main difference there is you're looking at interest rates.
The focus is the interest, not the principal.
Correct. So instead of picking the lowest debt that you have, let's say you have like $200 on a credit card, that's your lowest principal that you have to pay off. What you focus on is you focus on the highest interest rate first. You don't care about overall balances. You don't care about principal or anything like that. If you have a credit card bill that's a $30,000 credit card bill, but it has a 22% interest rate, that's your number one focus because of how high that interest rate is and how much that is killing you every single month. And if you pay off that $30,000 faster, not only is that going to give you more money than it would if you did the debt snowball route to pay off towards debt, it's also going to speed up your debt payoff journey because that's not that much extra money going out in interest because you covered that higher one first. Now, as far as a interest rate percentage of where I think is kind of like the cutoff point is between that like 6 and 8%. Personally, I'm a 6% or over guy is a pretty high interest rate for me, especially the time that we live in. So if you have anything that's over 6%, I categorize that as like a higher interest rate that needs to be paid off ASAP.
And this is the importance of talking to like friends about this because JJ, you are an Avalanche guy, I think now.
Mm-hmm. I was when I paid off debt.
And I still remain a snowball guy. And I think the main difference is I never, back to that, like, I was never bad with money as far as like credit cards. I was an overspender. I almost, in New York with my inflated salaries, I was bad with money because I made too much money. And I don't know, that sounds weird to people, but like, I was always in the argument I had with my wife, she's a lot more frugal than me. My argument was always, dude, we make so much money. Like, we don't have to worry about these bills. And she's like, Brad, we're spending more than we make. This lifestyle creep is real. And I'm like, no. So we didn't have credit card. I never needed a credit card. I never did. So I'm still a snowball guy because mine was student loans between my wife and I, and then maybe some car payments, my truck and her car. I think my highest interest rate was 6%, my highest one. So for me, and this is where like personal finance gets personal. If you're on JJ's side and your debt is a little bit credit cards and high interest rates, maybe you should be an Avalanche person. Where me, number one, I had all the same interest, so it didn't matter. And two, psychologically, I do like to check off boxes. I do like to I did like having the smallest balance and getting rid of it in a couple months and being like, gone. If you do the snowball, your highest interest rate might be your biggest principal. So now you're going to have 5 debts for 5 years, where every 6 months I knew, or every 3 months I knew I was getting across something off the list. So psychologically, you have to know where you're at too.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I literally wrote that down. Is that if you know you need you need those small wins to keep you motivated, the debt snowball is the perfect way to go psychologically because it does that. And I'm a cross off list item type person too, which I'm shocked I didn't go the snowball route, but I'm also a very analytical numbers person as well. So I'm glad you made that point because that is very, very important. Is that psychological part of the debt snowball that really does keep you motivated, to where you said, if you got your highest interest as your highest principal amount, well, then you're going to be paying on all 5 of those debts for a very long time. And you're like, well, hell, I'm never going to make these payments paid off. I might as well just keep going like I was. You're not going to win. So it really does depend on the person. And I know we're going to keep saying this, but it comes to be personal. It really does. I mean, that's how this works out. Now, let me ask you this though, Brad. So you said you're more of the debt snowball type of person. What if you had those credit cards, or what if you're talking to somebody right now? Like, let's say me, JJ I have the high interest credit cards with the higher balance amount. Would you still say that I need to go debt snowball, or would you say debt avalanche?
Well, I'm going to try and get a feel for the type of person you are, because I think psychologically, just like with dieting or whatever, I want to see what's going to be the most successful long term for people. But yeah, if somebody has a credit card debt, that's the other thing with credit card debts too. Unless you're really, really in trouble, the principal balance isn't usually going to be as high as a student loan or something like that. But no, I have no problem whatsoever advocating for attacking credit card debts at 15, 18%. I'm going to move those to the top of the list. But I will, like I said, getting to know somebody, and that's the beauty of like consulting. You get to know people and you kind of win with them, is you get them to say like, Brad, the interest doesn't matter right now. And I say, okay, well, and this is a point that I'll make. Nothing we do in personal finance is set in stone. You can be an Avalanche guy today and a Snowball guy the next day and a Snow girl the next. So
facts.
If I get somebody that has credit card debts, I'm going to say, hey, let's go for those first. But do you like to check things like how psychological does this need to be for you? If they're like, it needs to be psychological. I'm more worried about the momentum long term, especially if they have a huge principal balance. I know that this is going to be a journey for them for a year or two. I'm not worried about it. So if somebody needs to check off boxes, I'm going to move those higher interests down. If someone's like, Brad, you're working with me, I'm going to do whatever you tell me to do, and I'm going to do it like you're my coach, then yeah, I'm going to move the high interest up to the top, and I'm going to do a hybrid of both. And there's no debate. Either way, you're going to be paying off debt. And this is back to that, like, which way is a little bit, quote, more efficient for you and what's best for you. Either way, you win. At the end of the day, you're going to pay off debt. Whether you do a debt snowball or debt avalanche, you're going to pay off debt.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100% on that, man. So let's, we spent a lot of time on the debt one, but I think the baby steps too is probably the most time spent people like in a baby step. I think that's where probably majority of the time people have spent is either that one or baby step 6 probably, which we'll get to that in a second, but go ahead. What you got?
Yeah, no. And I'll tell you this, I thought baby step 2, even though it was the longest, was the hardest. And people still in debt will hate to hear me say this.
Don't ruin it for him, Brad.
No, you know what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
Paying off debt is so much easier when it comes to personal finance than being debt free. When you are debt free, you have a lot of money, but deciding where it's going to go is when you're in baby step 2, you have one job, pay off all of this. Then you get out of debt. And I used to think that getting out of debt was the end of the journey, like baby step 2 was the end.
Oh no, young guy. Yeah.
Oh my God. I have spent more sleepless nights worrying about baby steps 3 through 7 than I ever did with baby step 2.
And I'm very excited to touch on baby step 7, which we'll do at the end of the video. But I do think that's one that doesn't get talked about enough. And everyone's kind of, once they get to that step, they're lost. They're like, okay, well now what? So I'm excited to touch on that subject, but we'll do that in a little bit. Now, as far as baby step 3, so baby step 3 is save 3 to 6 months of expenses in a fully funded emergency fund. So now you're taking that $1,000 starter emergency fund and you're ramping that up to whatever 3 to 6 months of expenses is for you. You need to be the one to calculate that. Sit down with a pen and paper, look at your bills online, however you do your thing, whatever's comfortable for you, and add up every single expense you have. Your mortgage, gas for the month, gym membership, insurance, whatever it may be. If you pay stuff on annual payments, include that into that emergency fund. Include that full amount. That's what I do, just to be conservative. Now, my thoughts on the 3 to 6, and I don't want to spend too much time on baby step 3 because it's a pretty simple one, but I am more of an advocate of like 12 months in cash, like for emergency fund. But also with that being said, I use that cash for other investments. So if I find a rental property that I can have a down payment for, that cash is sitting in there for that. I kind of ramp it up. But also the line of work I'm in, I feel like my job or career or business could be gone tomorrow, and I want to make sure I got that cash for my family. We also like to travel, so like if we want to take a little break and we got the cash there to do that, it's just a little bit of extra freedom we have having that larger amount of cash in the bank, and it actually can decrease the lower you make your lifestyle too. So like if we pay off our mortgage, you can decrease that overall fully funded emergency fund by whatever your 6 months worth of mortgages was. So now you got freed up, a few $1,000s in cash. So that's kind of real quick my thoughts on baby step 3.
And you might be saying to yourself, these guys are 40 minutes into this podcast and they're just starting 3. Yeah.
I know.
Listen, we never try and drag episodes on and we never try and cut them early. So hey, maybe you gotta press pause, go crack another beer and put your feet up because this is valuable stuff. So
I just checked the clock. I was like, oh shit, it's 40 minutes.
So the main thing that you mentioned, I think this is the overarching theme that we need to have for baby step 3. It really depends on what your income security is and what your risk tolerance is and your age. And I think risk tolerance and age kind of go hand in hand. And I also need to let people know that if you're starting with baby step 1, if you put yourself on the same financial education as all the baby steps, this will be very confusing to you because, as we just mentioned, baby step 2 is going to be a long time. And while you're doing baby step 2, you're going to be actively learning about 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So when you get to baby step 3, this is when we can kind of loosen the reins. Why? Because you're debt free. The only thing that's really effing you over in life is being debt free financially, not in life, but financially in life is being in debt. And we can't argue that. When we get to baby step 3 and we start talking emergency funds, we can go down the spectrum of where your emergency funds are. Are they in cash? Are they here? Are they there? Or, as we learned in last week's episode, some of mine's in my Roth IRA. And JJ mentioned the amount of cash that you have depends on what your future goals are going to be. And this is when things get fun, but they also can get a little stressful because you don't know what to do. So people ask me all the time, Brad, 3 to 6 months, bud, what are you doing? When I first got out of debt, I was so excited to invest. I skipped it. I almost skipped baby step 3. I'm like, I'm so excited because you're out of debt. I'm so excited. I felt like I was like my 2-year-old when you let her out the front door and then she's like, freedom, and she runs to the end of the driveway and you don't follow her and then she looks back like, wait, I'm by myself. You have to realize that this is where the fun is going to begin. And maybe now you want to be 3 months, but then you might get to 3 months and I want 6 months. So you take 6 months. I personally, still to this day, and I've been debt free now for about a year and 6 months. In my checking account, I still have 1 month living expenses. That's it. But I have about a year's worth of cash, but they're all in sinking funds for different things like JJ mentioned. I want to get into real estate. I save money for taxes because I have side incomes. This is where you start to create sinking funds and you start to shoot money into different places. So to say I have a year's worth of expenses is it's a little false. I have a lump of sum of money that could probably cover a year of expenses, but they're all distributed: vacation, taxes, Christmas, birthday funds, wedding funds, all these different things. But as far as my quote emergency fund, with my very, very secure job, my wife's very, very secure job, and some pretty good passive income, if you come to me at the ATM and put a gun on the back of my head, you're getting 1 month of living expenses out of me. That's it. That's all you're getting.
Yeah, no, I think you make a good point there too about with the whole sinking funds thing. I think that's going to be a good episode because I don't do sinking funds. I kind of just have like a lump sum in one account. Or maybe that's I don't know. Maybe that's a Friday episode we can kind of tie in or something like that because it'd be real quick.
Somebody call and ask about our sinking funds so we can make a Friday episode about it.
Give us an excuse to talk about it because we do have different viewpoints on that. But no, I mean, Brad, you're right though, man. Like it just comes down to the person, and if you have like kind of different goals for traveling or real estate or whatever that may be, however you're holding those funds, it's going to do whatever it needs to do for its job.
So can we sum it up to this? And here's my philosophy. And I say this is Brad's philosophy, and you can agree or disagree. I created the amount of cash, just like when I said in baby step 1, figure out what your 1 month expenses make that. I figured out my worst case financial situation for today. Worst case. Let's say the oil burner blew, the hot water blew, the pool filter blew, and the AC blew, and my car broke down today. What is the worst case scenario I could have? I made that my emergency fund in cash.
Facts.
Because if all that stuff breaks today, I can cover that. And if a tree falls through the house, I got insurance for that. So that's not a worst case scenario for me. Tree falling through the roof, that's insurance. But I'm saying if the washer, the dryer, every utility in my house, and you can go around your house, if everything that I use every day broke today, could I cover it? That was my baby step 3.
Love it.
Baby step 4. This is our bread and butter now.
Yeah. Now we're in our wheelhouse here, buddy. So baby step 4 is invest 15% of your household income in retirement. What's your thoughts on that, Brad?
This is where a lot of people start to skew away. This is when the videos on YouTube from Baby Steps Brad start to be like, I don't know if I really agree with Dave Ramsey. So without going too far into it, I'll say this. And my only gripe against it, don't save 15% of your income into retirement. Put as much effing money as you can put into investments that does not stress your life out. Because if you do baby steps 1, 2, 3, 4, like, what are you going to do with the rest of the money? Like, hold that in cash? Like, save 15% of your retirement. Like, for me, save it all. That's my only gripe against it. Like, I hate that he put a number on. Like, if you have 50% of your money sitting around, Dave's like, hey, put 15% in. Okay, what the hell do I do with the other 35%, bro?
But here's the part on that then, Brad. And you're 100% right. But most people aren't in that case. You know, like most people probably have a hard time coming up with a 15% to invest in retirement, because I still remember back when I had my corporate job working in the cubicle before the construction days.
Even debt free?
Yeah, man. Like, I mean, I remember well, maybe not debt free, but that's a very few amount of people. But hang on, let me finish my thought here real quick. I remember being at like the water cooler, right? And people are talking about like their 401ks because no one knew what the hell to put their stuff into at the time. And I remember people being like, oh yeah, we just put in like, 2-3% or whatever. And after talking to so many people, majority of the people out there really aren't putting that much money into their 401k or retirement because they can't afford it. And that goes back to your point, like even people who are debt free, maybe that's the different case. And that's kind of why, Dave does say the 15% here. But the point I'm making is, I think it is a good foundation, but for someone who wants to take the next step up, and we haven't touched on this yet, Brad, and I knew I was going to bring this up in today's video, but like the FIRE movement, for example, if I feel like a lot of people start on Dave Ramsey and then stumble upon the FIRE movement for kind of like that extra step.
Right.
It's like that extra step of what you can focus on instead of these baby steps. And 15% is not going to cut it in the FIRE movement. And the FIRE movement, basically, for you new listeners out there, is financial independence, retire early. And the gist around this movement is you're putting the highest amount of a savings rate that you can to be able to retire early. So you're putting way more than 15% into retirement. And if you max out your retirement accounts, you're putting more money into brokerage accounts and real estate and other investment vehicles to be able to get to that financial freedom number at a relatively quick rate, because you're able to live the life that you want to live sooner, rather than if you would just stick and put 15% in for the next 40 years. I mean, who wants to do that anymore? I don't.
Yeah, and I'm going to follow up what you said, because you are right. And I jumped kind of like right into the extreme there. And there's people at my job that are like, what do you mean you max your 457 and your 403B out? And I'm like, okay, let's go back. Let's rewind a little bit. I didn't always do that. And I don't expect people to enter baby step 4. And we're going to mention that 4, 5, and 6 are going to be meant to do at the same time. Like they're not, those were no longer sequential. We're going to be doing the next 3 in the same time. But you're right, JJ. If you feel like you need to ease into this a little, maybe I tell people maybe you're doing 4% now. Next quarter, raise it to 4.5%. Then in 6 months, raise it to 5%. You have time to raise it up until you get to the max. And that's what I did with my 457 and my 403B. I didn't wake up one day and I was like, I'm going to max both these out. I knew I got bi-yearly raises, so I haven't taken a raise in 4 years, because every single time I got a raise, I just contributed that into my retirement account until I ended up maxing it. And to be honest, I don't know what percentage that is. And that's the kind of another point to be made. Like, don't worry. And maybe that's really what I meant when I said save as much as you can. Don't focus so much on what percentage of your income you're saving. But by now at baby step 4, you've learned so much about personal finance. You've learned like about index funds and Roth IRAs and you've listened to this podcast. And I didn't want to say like, maybe I came off as being like, don't do 15, do 50. What I meant was don't focus so much on the 15. If it's 10% for you, but if it's 10%, next year make it 11. Next year, make it 12.
Yeah, I mean, build up to that 15% as fast as possible.
Yes.
I mean, because you want to be at least hitting that. But, I mean, yeah, you make a great point there.
Like for me to max my 403b and my 457 is more than 15% of my income.
Right, exactly.
So it's okay to go above and beyond because I get so many emails where people are like, okay, I'm at 15% invested in my retirement. What do I do now? And I'm like, did you max your 401k? No. I'm at 15%. I'm like, okay, make it 18% and max your 401k out.
Yep. Yeah. So, okay, well, that leads us to the next one then. It kind of goes hand in hand with this. And I know you and I kind of have a little difference of opinion here. I don't want to dive too much into this episode. I want to leave that for maybe its own little episode on its own because it would be good.
Just scratch the surface a little.
We'll scratch it. We'll entice the listeners to keep listening for this episode. So baby step 5 is save for your children's college fund. So these could be, like an UTMA or a 529 plan or whatever it may be. So Brad, although I know your thoughts, what are your thoughts on this?
Just scratching.
I don't want to spend too much time here because I do really want to touch on 6 and 7 here real quick.
I am 100%. This is from day one to now, in my personal finance journey in 4 years. I am against the 529. I am against any savings for education, especially for people that save for their kids' future when they haven't got their own future. And I hate when I hear, oh, I have to put some money in the 529, but I have $30,000 in debt. Like, yo,
so true.
Yo, you got to put your ducks in a row before you worry about your kids. But let's say your ducks in a row, I'm still against 100%. No questions asked. You could debate me into the couch. I'll quiver into the couch. There is pretty much nothing at this point that anybody can do to talk me into a 529, and we'll talk about the reasons why when we do a 529 episode.
Yep, and I'll just leave it here real quick. I do have 529 plans for both of my kids.
You jerk.
So we'll leave that for a whole nother episode. But so moving on here, Brad, baby step 6. Baby step 6 is pay off your home early. So again, a little bit of a difference opinion between you and I here. So what are your thoughts on baby step 6?
I want to finish 5 just because.
Okay.
I just want to reiterate that if you want to save your kids' college education, I don't think you're doing anything wrong. It's just not something I want to do.
Right. We'll get into it on the episode.
When you hear that future episode, you'll know what I'm saying. Like, I don't think you're doing anything wrong. I have an alternate path.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
So
I got some good stuff on that one too. I think that'll be a good one.
So baby step 6, pay off the mortgage. I'm not paying off my mortgage actively. So there's a couple of things here that Dave Ramsey preaches. He preaches fixed mortgage rates. Definitely. I'm for that.
Agree.
He talks about 15 years, and I'm for that, not for rentals, but for your primary residence, I'm for 15 years. And I do not like when people are like, I'll just get to 30 and add some every single month. My rebuttal to that, and I just had this conversation with Joe Cirillo, if you're listening, buddy. He's thinking about buying a house. And I'm like, 30 years is a long time to commit to doing extra. Like, so many things can come up in your life where you're like, oh man, that double mortgage payment we were making, I don't want to make that anymore. That's a long time. So for me, I knew that was a long time. I committed to 15 years. And he says, put 20% down. I will speak, before I talk about paying off the mortgage, I'll speak from personal experience. I bought a house I could not afford. And I paid PMI before I ever knew about Dave Ramsey, and it sounded like a great idea. I'm going to get to buy this house. Oh, I'm not going to be living at my mom's. I'm going to have a house. I'm going to pay this PMI, blah, 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 personal mortgage insurance. When I found out, like, what a stupid, quote, stupid tax that was, there is nothing that made me more angry than PMI. I was somebody that never paid a bill late, never did anything wrong, all these things, but I was paying insurance because the bank had to lend me money because I didn't have enough money to put up for the house. And it didn't matter how good I was with money or that I had a YouTube channel. I had to pay that every single month. And it's something when you buy a house, you're so excited, especially your first home, to buy a house, that you don't realize 5 years later how much PMI is going to sting. And knowing what I know now, all it would have took was 2 or 3 more months of extreme saving to avoid years of PMI.
It's literally throwing $100 bills out the window.
It just feels dirty. It feels like you made like a bet. It just, like I said, I'm sure we've been to the casino where you went up to your room and you're like, that was a dirty night.
Oh yeah.
I shouldn't have put that on black.
And I've had that happen.
I've already lost everything and I just put that last chip on black. I shouldn't have done it. That's how dirty PMI felt to me. And so that aside, don't pay PMI. I agree with, if you're going to buy a house and there's overwhelming circumstances, like I'll tell people like, hey, if you can't put 20% down at a 15-year fixed mortgage, you shouldn't be buying a house. I understand some people don't have that choice and they need to do it. But if you have an apartment with your girl and you guys want to buy a house because you think you're going to the next level, good. Next level is don't be in debt. Stay in that effing apartment and save 20% down, because just like baby step 1, you're going to learn a very valuable lesson, what it feels like to try and save 20% for a house. And my New York friends are like, Brad, do you know how much money that is? And I'm like, yes. Stop going to the bar. Stop going out to eat every effing night of the week. Stop upgrading your iPhone every 6 months when they come out with a new iPhone. Like, stop buying new cars every 2 years. If the house is so important to you, don't do it. Now, with all that said, I have a very low interest rate on my house. And I think the argument against Dave Ramsey here is I can get more in the market. 2 years ago, when interest rates were like 4.5%, that was probably a pretty valuable argument. Now, at an interest rate under 3%, it's like, yikes. And knowing what I know now, I know I can get it back. But I feel like getting that I put 25% down. 25% down, 15-year fixed mortgage at 3% interest rate. I'm not attacking my mortgage. I'm investing the difference.
That's very hard to debate. It really is. It's very hard to debate that and say you should be paying off your mortgage early. But I'm going to say that I am on the opposite end of the spectrum. I do like the fact of having the home mortgage paid off only because of the risk factor. I like the fact that I will be owning my home outright, no mortgage payment. But Brad, with everything you said, you and your wife have a very, relatively non-risky job, pretty safe income. You guys are set up very well to where like my circumstances, my income for my family is YouTube, and YouTube could be done next month, tomorrow. Yeah. So I have a lot more risk on my shoulders and I feel comfortable. And then again, we're going to say the same thing we've said 5,000 times.
Yes.
It's personal.
Yeah.
It's personal. So, it all depends on what works for you. And my wife and I are in an agreement that we want the mortgage paid off to know that we don't have that worry in case I do lose 99% of my income.
So let's just say, I'll give you a little perspective through my eyes. Or let's say JJ Buckner is a YouTuber and he lives in New York and his mortgage is $2,500 a month. If he lost his YouTube job, $2,500 a month is a big effing deal for him. So if he had a split income where he had a pretty good net profit on his months, he might want to duck that, get rid of that mortgage so that if poop hit the fan, he doesn't have to worry about $2,500 a month. Where if Brad is a school teacher and is a tenured school teacher at 15 years in his career, has really good ratings, great rapport, pretty much no shot can lose his job, that $2,500 has a completely different meaning to me and you. So yeah, it's like,
so true.
And this goes back to baby step 2 and that psychological thing. And this is the conversations that we have. JJ wants to go to bed saying, if tomorrow nobody watches my videos ever again, I don't want a $900 mortgage payment.
Yep.
Where I say, nobody watches my videos anyway. And,
I'll get the hell out of here.
And I'm not going to lose my job. So I know that my mortgage is covered. So I can take a little bit more. I can go on the risk side and take a little more risk with my investments, where you have to balance. Your risk comes in your job. My risk comes in my investments. And at the end of the day, we both end up pretty equal.
Yeah, I would agree.
Boom. So pay off your mortgage if you don't want to pay a mortgage payment.
Well, and I do want to touch on that real quick again. The grass, and Dave says this too, the grass feels different when it's paid off. When you own that grass, when that grass is yours, and you walk out and you're barefoot and you say, this is mine.
Yeah.
No one else owns this. I don't own anyone else the money. It's a pretty cool feeling. And hopefully my wife and I have ours paid off this year.
You might get that in baby step too.
Yep.
When I paid off my truck, and still to this day, when I paid off my truck, that first month, every time I drove it, I was like, this is my effing truck. And when people are like, yo, nice truck, man. What's the payment on those Tacomas? I'm like, $0. And like, I remember the neighbor next door to me, they're older than me, but they had a mortgage burning party when I was probably like 17 years old.
That's awesome.
My parents went over there. They had a big party. And at the end of the night, they threw their mortgage papers that they probably printed out or whatever. They threw them in the fire. And at the time, I was like, okay, boomer.
Now you're that guy.
But now, yeah. And I mean, but for me, 15 years is a great timeline. Like,
yeah, it is.
When my dad passed away, he still had a mortgage. I bought this house off of his estate. And to me, I'm like, all right, well, I did the right things. When my daughter is 15 years old, I won't have a mortgage.
Yeah, that's huge, man.
If you know what mortgage rates go for in New York, you know that that's going to really free up a really big piece. And back to the 529s real quick is, if I take my mortgage payment from the day it's paid off and I forward that into future college payments, my kids are going to be good.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about baby step 7. And then we're out of here.
The big one. This is the one that I am so excited about, because this is probably the one I've spent the most time trying to study and learn and know truly what to do over the past 6-7 years of me really having this passion for, financial independence and bettering myself financially. So for Dave Ramsey, baby step 7 is build wealth and give. Okay, but what the hell does that mean? I mean, like, what? Okay, like, I can build wealth. Yeah, sure. But how do I do that? So this is kind of my thought process. This is where the FIRE movement comes in. So the FIRE movement really does a great job. And Brad, I would consider us part of the FIRE movement. I feel like our podcast is kind of towards financial independence. And I really think this is the next step, the next level. You're leveling up in the finance space, because you are figuring out the different ways to build wealth and give, but to the next step, be able to become financially free.
I consider myself, even though I quote work, I am financially independent, which to me means that I work the jobs I want to work when I want to work them. And I'm not retired, and I bust your chops all the time. You don't have a W-2, and you say, Brad, I'm not retired. I'm grinding on these Neo videos, and I get that. And I think you can be financially independent. Like, I'm pretty good with money if I don't want to work.
Explain exactly what that means. Like, what does financial independence mean?
So financial independence means that if I do not need a W-2 job to move forward, that I can live off what I have as far as passive income and the side businesses that I've created and the investments I've made to be able to live off of those. And I say this 100% from the bottom of my heart. I am still excited to go to my job every single day. I'm very fortunate in that. Even through COVID, where I'm teaching virtually and I'm streaming through videos, and parents are hearing me say things in the background, and I'm getting in trouble for and I come home, like, at the end of the day, I am blessed to be a school teacher. I'm blessed to teach in a state that pays teachers what they probably should get paid. And, like, just because I have a W-2 job does not mean I'm not financially independent. If my school district went under tomorrow, I wouldn't reapply for another job. I would pack it up, and that would be the end of my teaching career.
Okay, cool. So how does one become financially independent? What are some steps to get there? What should somebody look at or focus on? If they're a 24 young kid, no debt, they don't have a home yet, but they want to focus on being financially independent, what should they do?
Yeah, and we had an episode about like getting to financial freedom, and it talks about like how many expenses do you want to have and the lifestyle that you want to live. And it's pretty much it. I guess the rule of thumb is financially independent is you take your expenses at your most expensive year that you think you're ever going to have, you multiply it by 25, and that's how much money you need to have invested. And then you can live off the dividends, the capital gains, and things like that. But I'm more excited about baby step 7 as far as the giving piece. And I never realized that you can give in more ways than just money when you're financially independent. Because if there's one thing that financial independence has taught me is the value of time. And sometimes giving your time is way more valuable than giving money. And volunteering places and things like that. The volunteering I've done in my life has probably been some of the most fulfilling times of my life. And I also come from the service industry. My wife and I, we picked up at a restaurant because everything's takeout right now. And we went a little bit early. Grandma and grandpa were over. And we were going to go pick up dinner together. And there was this nice Italian joint around the block. And they pour a pretty good glass of red. And we walked in there on a Saturday night and there was nobody there. And I think we got about $160 worth of takeout. And the bartender poured us a glass of red wine. I gave her a $75 tip. And, it was a little bit of coming from the brewery and the service industry and knowing that Saturday night in this place, what it was a year ago, she probably cleaned up. And she was a bartender, a young girl. She probably didn't know as much about money as we know now. And she was probably struggling, and that probably wasn't her favorite place to be. And there was nobody else in there. But I was able to give because of the steps that I've taken. And the live and give like nobody else. I'm really starting to get that. And I follow Jeremy from the Personal Finance Club, and he donates so much money. And I'm just like, I'm almost envious of how much money he has to give. And it's not, but he has money to give. For me, I can't wait to volunteer and give my time and give my money. I think that's going to be the most fulfilling thing. And yeah, baby step 7 gets criticized. It's like, that's so vague. What does that mean? Mm-hmm. But the beauty of it is it means at that point, it just means happiness. You're going to do whatever you got to do that makes you so happy.
Yeah, giving it's something that makes you feel just a different type of way. You can't really explain that feeling. It's something incredible you get. Like, even if you're helping somebody out, like, Lindsay and I have done the things where, you pay the bill, like somebody's eaten, like for some reason I have a soft spot for, like people who like are eating alone at a restaurant, which I do it all the time. I like eating alone sometimes. It's just, I like my me time. But like if it's an older couple or older person or elder person or something, and it's just, I don't know, it's something about it is I want to pay their bill because
they've earned it.
They have, man. Yeah. And like, you don't know what that person's going through, or like, even if you're the person in line in the drive-thru and you want to pay for the person, but something like, go do that. I will say this. If you guys are listening right now and you've listened to up to this point, if you want to do something, try it out. Pay for this. If you're going to get Starbucks tomorrow morning, pay for the person behind you, Starbucks. It feels amazing. It really does. So the
you
giving,
never get that thank you, but you don't need it.
No, it's a great feeling. Your whole day is made doing that first thing in the morning. So I did want to touch on the giving part. Now, as far as like building wealth, I mean, Brad, you hit it with the financial independent movement and like the, times in by 25. I also like am taking a little bit of a different route by going the real estate route. But again, we talk about all that in that financial independence episode. Maybe we can link that down in the show notes if people want to go check that out.
Yeah.
But I mean, that kind of, what's your thoughts, Brad? I mean, baby step 7 is kind of vague, but it really does kind of like that. I feel like that's the next step into financial independence.
I mentioned this earlier with baby step 3. By the time if you look at each one of these steps at once, there's so much education and time and, inspiration that comes through that time. So when you get to baby step 3, you're like, oh, wow, the same as with 7. And I'm not at baby step 7. I still have a mortgage. So technically I'm not at baby step 7, but I am living and giving like I've never lived and give before. And the feeling is just incredible. And we'll start to wrap this episode up, but I will say there is one thing that we did not specifically state that I think can become a future episode. And that's why we didn't state it, is Dave talks about the types of investments to make. And he talks about mutual funds and growth and international and other things like that. We've talked about our investing patterns, and we'll talk about them more in a little bit. But I just want to, if you've heard like about his certain ways to invest, you can keep following this podcast and you'll learn about how we invest. And I think before we get out of here tonight, guys, we want to do something that really you guys think that it's probably like, as you're writing them, you probably think it's like cliche or whatever. But I need to tell you, like when we pay for somebody's Starbucks behind us, you guys leaving a comment, that's what makes our day. Like that fires us up. And our podcast has grown exponentially over the last couple of months through just seeing downloads and seeing reviews and seeing the Discord and the Facebook groups. Like I said, like this, you guys are changing our lives for the better. And I think JJ wants to highlight one of those comments tonight.
Yeah, so, every now and then, Brad and I will read a review that we get, and you guys can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. I think that's the only place you can leave a review right now.
Yeah.
But I got one today I got to read out. It's from JDub32 Falcons, and he says, favorite finance podcast. Quickly becoming my favorite podcast. Been watching JJ's YouTube for a while now. Him and Brad break down everything in finance that may seem intimidating to the average people to make it so understandable. Thanks, guys. Cheers. I mean, you can't beat it, man. Like I know we say this all the time, but I love them. I love reading them. I read every single one of them. I send them to you through text. Like it's just, it's something we get excited to see, guys. So we really do appreciate those reviews. It really does mean a lot to us.
Amen, brother. It really does. And we know that sometimes there's some non-Apple people out there that can't leave a review, and you let us know and you DM us and you text us, and yeah, we're not stopping, guys. And thank you so much. We know this was a longer winded episode, but something that it needs to be stated. And we wanted to give, like I said, full disclosure, even though we're selling options and we're
that's so true.
Yeah, we're YOLO. We didn't even get into the fact that we use credit cards. Like I said, this is, even though we may not be Dave Ramsey loyalists, I think there is, you have to remember where you came from. And I came from Baby Steps Brad, and I'm proud of that. And I'll never look back, and that will still be my first place. And if we're going to have a podcast about personal finance, JJ and I both agree that Dave Ramsey needs to get credit where credit's due. Guys, thank you so much for listening. We are going to get into the next one. We'll see you every Friday now because we have Friday voicemails. If you'd like to leave a voicemail question for our Friday episodes, please do so. I'll leave a link down in the description below. You can find those also on Discord and as Facebook as well. Till we see you guys in the next one. Cheers.